At around the age of 13, I already knew what kids now know generally, that they're born into a lunatic asylum. And I already had a sense, unformed, unarticulated, but I had a sense that I was living in a madhouse, individually and collectively, and that the people all around me, everybody was lying to each other and lying to themselves, and nothing was as it appeared to be. By the time I was 19, going to a stupid school, learning stupid stuff, and it suddenly dawned upon me that what I wanted to do was write. And what I wanted to write about was the lunatic asylum. I wanted to sort of make it clear that this was a madhouse, and that everybody in it was crazy, and that the whole thing was run by the criminally insane. The rest of us were just normally insane. Anyway, through Ouspensky and some of these others, I was introduced to a school of thought that I had that bore practically no relation to anything that I had read before. And I had by this time read some Eastern philosophy, some works on Aldous Huxley on Vedanta and yoga, and so I had read some of Theosophy, so I had a bit of a smattering of this kind of knowledge. But what attracted me almost instantly to Gurdjieff, even before I read the man himself, was that he was the first person I had ever come across, even if posthumously, who was as contemptuous of Western civilization as I was. The difference was, and it was quite clear, that he knew how to live in the chaos, in the madness, and I did not really. I was a powder keg. I mean, the first press, I had more buttons than the space shuttle, and any one of them pressed and I'd explode. And as I read through Ouspensky and I started reading what the doctrine was all about, I suddenly came to the recognition that these guys were right about certain very crucial things that we take for granted. The central tenet of it, let's say it has a cosmological side, it has a psychological side, it has a personal side, it's a kind of, in its own way, it is a reconstruction, and I'll talk about Gurdjieff himself in a little while. He's a very mysterious and intriguing and explosive character. It is designed, I realized this quite quickly as I was going through it, as a complete teaching, but including a practice, and that was the major interest to me, because there's a lot of very, very interesting work out there on all sorts of subjects, philosophical, theological, scientific, and so on, but not many that are actually practices that you join in and you put yourself through the discipline the way you would do it playing baseball or violin or something like that. And the curious thing actually about, I hate to use the word spiritual, I'm going to do it in inverted quotes, but almost one of the main problems when anybody talks this way is that in the New Age community this sort of thing is rife, and it's one of the aspects of it that I find least attractive, that is rarely associated with anything that is a rigor. And we all know that if you want to play baseball and just fool around on Sundays, well, fine, but that's never going to get you to Yankee Stadium, except as a spectator. And you want to play the violin at Carnegie Hall, you don't play a couple of scales and get into it yourself to play the violin, but on anything that is, let's say, genuinely inner development, and you go to any bookstore and there are 5,000 books on inner development, but I came to realize that if you try and do it yourself, you're going to take the easy way. And if you're going to, as I said, play baseball, you listen to the coach. If you're going to play the violin, you go to a violin teacher, and if you want to get something that works inside, basically you have to go to somebody who you think knows more than who you are convinced knows more than you do, or at least can direct you, because there's things that you don't see for yourself, even though at a certain point you recognize that you need something or another. With me it was easy because, as I said, I had all of these buttons and they could be pressed at any time. And the central tenet of Gurdjieff's teaching on the psychological and personal level is that we are asleep. We walk around and all of that, and we may do very, very intelligent things, but everybody is asleep. This goes, Einstein is as asleep as George W. Bush. I mean, he doesn't live in a nightmare, but he's just as asleep. And we have moments of awakening, which we often call inspiration or revelation or something like that. Creative people, children have them all the time, but they don't they don't remember them and don't remember that for a moment they are awake. And it's very difficult to describe that, those moments of awakening, but we do have them. Everybody has them once in a while. And where you suddenly, you're familiar you, but there's another you, and it's not quite an out-of-the-body experience either. I mean, those happen as well, certainly. Never too many can happen with those, but lots of people have had out-of-body experiences. But where you're in full flight, as it were, you're living the life as you're living it, and then suddenly you see yourself doing whatever it is that you're doing. So you're split. There's a part of you that observes yourself in action. And that's part of the aim of the exercise. This is an incredibly difficult thing to do. It didn't take a lot of convincing to realize that, of course, when you react, somebody says something nice to you, you glow. Somebody says something nasty. What do you do? You walk into a room, what are they going to think with me? All of these things are part of our personalities. Our personalities are all different, but according to Gurdjieff, we weren't always like this as human beings. Gurdjieff was some of you may have seen him, he wasn't tall, very powerfully built, with an enormous shaved head, a huge handlebar mustache, and these penetrating eyes that penetrate even in the photograph. I mean, people would describe how this man seemed to see right through them and see. So the central tenet of the Gurdjieff practice is that we are asleep. Some of us are very nice people and we're in a pleasant dream, and some of us are not such nice people and they're in a more nightmarish dream. But basically, everybody is asleep to begin with, and according to Gurdjieff, we weren't always that way. According to Gurdjieff, you never know with this man if you take what he's talking about literally or metaphorically, or if he's having you on. Sometimes he may be doing that. And he set up this remarkable school. It's not very populous, but quite a number of rather fairly well-known people have been or are in one way or another associated with Gurdjieff. And normally they keep, it's not illegal to talk about it or anything like that, but they basically tend to keep a fairly low profile. And when Jason just gave me the introduction about being offensive, I like that. I mean, I always try to be as offensive as humanly possible. But the reason is not just because I'm trying to make people angry, but rather to extrapolate from the Gurdjieff saying, which was probably one of the two most important things. Everyone probably has a Gurdjieff lesson to learn, and probably everyone will pick something different because of our own individualistic, our own different personalities. So my two favorites, one I use as my screensaver, and the other is just something that I put into somewhat different words. And the one is that Gurdjieff talks about why do we react to insults, and he has his own explanation for it, but I just encapsulated it as whoever and whatever presses your buttons is your master. Now, that was the main thing for me, because I don't like being anybody's slave. Now, to get yourself into a position where you don't get your buttons pushed is not easy, and if you can, but you can turn it around as well, because let's say I get a really nasty criticism from the reviewer or something like that, I get lots of those. Well, if I react, doesn't matter how unfair what he says is, or she says is, doesn't matter how bad the review is, if I react, he's got me. I'm his slave. And depending on how much you value your freedom, that won't be everybody's thing. Everybody probably doesn't have that same problem. But this to me was hugely useful, because I was going through life endlessly having buttons pushed. And once the lesson sank home, it's not that I can necessarily do this all the time, even now after all of this time, but the responsibility is mine.